Welcome everyone to our second Inko Club webinar. And I wanted to say that just to kind of clarify the setup and how this will work, I think it won't be a very typical webinar. Because we don't have a very typical webinar setup. We actually, just to let you know how that works, behind the scenes. We as Inko Club, as the community of internal comms people, we don't have any activity for now that would actually bring any income. So we're trying to do whatever we do as much costless as possible. So we're using, in most cases, solutions that we can just simply afford. So sorry for the fact that you don't get beautiful reminders, like all this kind of calendar invites and so on. But for now, we didn't find a solution yet how to do that free of charge. So if any one of you has an idea, we'll be like super happy to learn from you. And also here for Zoom, we use the setup when it's actually a group meeting, which has a big benefit. It gives you an option to talk to us as well. So we thought that it would be nice to use it, to have this kind of conversational event, let's call it like that, where in the moments when we have some questions, just, like, feel free to unmute and normally talk, There will be moments where you might decide that it's actually better for you to write on the chat, or for instance, like Zuza, I think this is what we agreed on, that it makes sense that if you have questions while we speak, then maybe it's better to put them in writing in the chat, because then we can, like, find a moment where to come back to your question and discuss it. But there will be moments when we will have questions to you. So also, as I said, like, feel free to unmute and talk, and let's have it in this way. And just for me to have it more clear. Okay, I just opened the chat so that I can also see what you're writing, and Zuza will be controlling the chat a bit more than myself. I take care of changing the slides, so we divided the responsibility in this way. Okay, so we thought that it would be good to actually talk about culture in the remote setup. That's a topic that came to us a month ago when we were at the meetup organized by Ysoft, and this topic popped up in the discussion, and it actually became a bit bigger topic, and we thought that it makes sense to dig deeper into it, to find out what's happening, like what in different discussions, in different channels, social media, and so on, to gather what we found, and also what we think and what we experience, and to start a discussion about it, because it seems that's the good moment. Zuzi, is there something that you'd like to add to this long beginning?
No, it's just that even some of the clients or some of the companies that we work with or for deal with the question that it's not just as a response to COVID-19, and now it seems like everyone's talking about remote work and everything, but actually we think it's been a long-term thing and ongoing, and many of the companies are thinking about how to become more digital, or what to offer millennials and the younger generation that wants to work in a different way. So maybe the whole situation with coronavirus just speed it up for some, but we've been seeing these questions, and even related to internal comms over the past 1 or 2 years, quite often that companies ask, like, what do we need to get, how to set it up, because we are becoming international, or our younger workers want to travel and want to have a different work-life balance than the generation before. So just to that it's not only a response to this whole coronavirus situation, but it's we think it's been an ongoing trend in many companies.
And maybe just, like a quick explanation who we are and why we organize this. So together with Zuzan, we actually had the same thought, more or less at the same time, to build a community of people who are interested in internal comms, and like mostly focusing on the Czech Republic. We thought that, well, there is a forum for HR, there is a forum for marketing, there are different forums for different areas. There's actually nothing that would be focusing on internal comms. So we decided to change that. And as I said, like for now, we don't have any activity that would actually bring any income to the community or to us personally or something like that. So whatever we do it just because we believe it makes sense to share knowledge and experience. Maybe with time we will get into something more, I don't know, educational, some kind of training or this kind of stuff. But for now we are doing this just because we think it makes sense. So if you want to join us and just benefit from that, well, we'd love to have you on social media in different places if you'd like to join us, and maybe also, like share the effort that we're actually putting into it to start some discussions, then we'll be also happy to have you. We're both on Facebook and on LinkedIn. And just to add, we're also on YouTube. We have like our previous webinar there, and this webinar is recorded and we'll put it on YouTube as well. Okay, so maybe let's jump into the topic itself. And here, I guess it makes sense to put some basis for it and to maybe explain what does it actually mean to be remote. And Zuzi, I think like you have a lot of great ideas. We had our long discussions before that as well. So we'll try to bring back what our discussion looked like.
Yeah, okay. So, well, thanks for the word. So let me start with the thing that's in the middle, and that's transformation, because as we were discussing the whole topic with Diana and looking at different challenges and approaches of different companies and different setups, to me, it all comes back to transformation. And what I mean by that is that, especially now connected to coronavirus, for many of the companies, it has been a big leap of faith and switching to remote pretty much overnight. And now, as the situation hopefully is calming down, and in many companies now, some people are coming back, some are not. We think it's time for discussion and time for some work that needs to be done, because when the coronavirus was happening, the businesses had to be running. Usually they didn't have time to think about the strategy, the long-term plans and everything that's long-term. They had to deal with the crisis. So it's natural that they thought of different tools, channels, and they just did what they could to keep the conversations going and keep the business running as usual as possible. But now there needs to be a step back, and actually the companies need to realize that they are somewhere on the way of transformation. Some are further, some are more at the beginning, but still it's a transformation and it needs to be treated that way. So it should have some kind of project It should have some kind of strategy, goals, and it should be treated also from the change management perspective. So the people need to be informed. The management needs to be aligned. So now it's not about we think that the discussion about being remote, not being remote, and how to do it, it's not that much about the specific tools. Should we have Slack, or should we have MS Teams, or should we do events once a week or once per year? But it should go back to the basics and to the core, and it should have some kind of transformation strategy. And if you have done any transformation in your company in the past years, you know that no tools and no like gadgets or tips and tricks can do the work. It's a hard work and it's a long-term process, but now is the time to look at it this way, because we are hopefully out of the crisis. So the discussion shouldn't be about specific tools and specific tricks and webinars sharing how companies do what, but about the unique process of each company realizing they're in the middle of some transformation.
Now, if I can jump in here, I think like everyone should come back even to the step to think, you know, like what kind of setup like the company wants to have and what kind of setup makes sense for the company. And when we think, okay, when there was a crisis, remote work meant mostly working from home. But there are so many different kinds of, you know, like, and setups of working remotely that could be taken into account, that it makes sense to really come back to that. Well, of course, working from home is one of the options, but then the question is how much of working from home. There are companies like GitLab, for instance, that are 100% remote, like they don't have any kind of an office anywhere. And that has, for instance, a huge implication on how to set it up from the legal point of view, from the HR point of view. When you have people all over the world, there are of course benefits of having that, because then you take the talent from the country where it is and you're not limited to a given location. But the setup is totally different. You might have people who are some days from home, some days from the office. And then you might have a situation where they never meet with their other colleagues who also work partially here, partially there, but on different days, for instance. So that also, for them, they work remotely with each other all the time because they never meet. You might have setups where people work from the office, but they work internationally. So they actually work remotely with their partners in different countries. So there are really different setups in all of that. And making a decision about what is best for the company is not about, okay, so how to legitimate what actually happened during coronavirus. It's about using this moment to really review the strategy and what makes sense.
And just to add to what Diana was just saying, is that, and also connected to what I was saying at the beginning, is that some of the companies may be remote, but they don't even know it, or they don't consider themselves remote. And I don't think, looking at who's participating today, most of the companies are IT or finance, so it's a different situation. But for instance, in some of the industries where they have, for instance, drivers, and they have people working in the office, and then they have drivers or people that work partially from home and partially they're running all around and talking to customers or going to places. So they wouldn't, and they are traditional companies, like, or family owned, so they don't consider themselves to be remote, because it has this kind of sticker that it's this new trend of millennials and remote companies where no one ever sees anyone else from the company or from the team. But actually you may be in a company that's actually remote, but you just have never looked at it this way, because you wouldn't consider, I don't know, Česká pošta or someone of this setup as a remote company. But actually, there are people that don't have emails and that you cannot reach in the traditional ways, even looking from the internal comms point of view. So then it gives also some of the companies an option to reconsider their strategy and their look at company culture, employee engagement, and internal comms, even if they are very traditional from their own point of view, or even from the society point of view. So yeah, so we believe that this discussion should be taking place everywhere now, not just the traditional industries like IT or finance, where you would expect to have the remote setup possible.
Yeah, and there's a really valid comment from Ray that also you might have those microcultures within the company, and the example mentioned by Ray, Salesforce, right? That might be entirely entirely remote in that case, and it has impact on everything actually, like even benefits that you choose, you know, like in the company, what do you want to have, right? So if you move much more to working remotely than, well, having fresh fruit in the office, that's not for everyone, right? So maybe there's, it's just an example, but there might be, you know, like some other things that that don't bring, you know, like the same impression when you give it to the employees, and maybe there's something else that you could actually give them that is much more meaningful. Maybe you know, like in case of people working from home, maybe some additional money, you know, can compensate for the fact that they need to have their own internet connection and so on. So there's a lot actually that should be reviewed, but the important thing is to keep everyone informed about what are the plans, what the company, like how the company wants to change, in which direction it wants to go. It wants to go. It might start with including recruitment, employer branding, for instance, so that they know whom to hire, and you know, like what the future will look like, so that they don't promise something that actually won't be there, and that they can base, you know, their promise on something that the company is preparing. So I could see in the answers that you gave when you were registering that 3/4 actually of the group is working now, partially from the office, partially from home, and more than half of our group works in the companies that consider becoming more remote. So if so actually the question that I have, and you can either unmute to comment or write in the chat, and the question that I have is, has your company already decide, you know, like what to do? Has it decided what to do? What the setup should look like? If you know that the company wants to be more remote, do you know what that exactly means? Are you at the moment where you really have clarity about the plans of your company? And everyone looks where to click for the chat. Yeah.
Is it doing anything?
Okay, yeah, that worked. Yeah, because I also saw that Iveta went on unmute, so I didn't want to, you know, jump in. But from perspective of UI, like, of course, we are a huge global organization, so it will take a long time to implement this kind of big change. But we already have a definition. We want our offices to become more like places of collaboration, hubs, places where you come to meet with your communities of practice, and so on and so on. So we have it defined, but there's also a very big cultural change that will have to happen together with it, but it is actually perfect because it fits exactly what we wanted to do anyway prior to Corona. It fits our strategy really greatly. So it was a good kind of impulse to go with it. So yeah, so we have it defined, and now it is up to the execution, which will be a long process, but I think it will be definitely worth it, and many people are excited. Yeah, I think it's difficult to tell. I think that it will be very different in different countries and different regions. But yeah, we'll see. For now, we know what we want to do. We will see if we manage.
So good luck.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, we have.
So if I can add, for my company or for our company, we are Czech-based, but we have offices around the world, and we are in the process of defining what is it supposed to mean to be more remote. But there's like so many different aspects that need to be like considered and actually put on the paper, like legal, HR, operations are stepping in. So we are in that process, but it's going to take even longer than we originally anticipated, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's good that the discussion has already started, seems like, and why so?
Yes.
Yes. So great. And we have some people writing to the group chat. So Christina wrote that they have already the rules defined, and so how it should look. Anna is writing that PPG is not able to have all the people working from home, as they have labs and plants and other sort of offices, but that don't allow home office. So, but that there is no clarity so far, even in the Brno office, how they will manage or how the future will look like. Anna is writing that some of it has been defined, but not the overall setup. And Ray has been supporting UPS. Yeah, so that's
in what Ray writes, I think it's quite typical, like like from the crisis that happened right now, that a lot of companies that were hesitating, is it good for us, like if they, for instance, had a plan, like in this case that Ray describes, to move, like it was like a super long-term plan and so on, and then when it actually happens, then people realize, well, it wasn't that hard, like it's not that bad, it actually helps to save some money, or people are more productive than in the office than we thought it would be otherwise, and so on. So yeah, I think this shock that happened might actually bring a lot of positive observations to the company, that they were kind of forced to do that. So now they know where their own risks and their own opportunities and benefits are. So it's much easier to continue, like to actually do the same thing, move to remote to some extent much faster than it would be without this crisis. And personally, I need to say that I also hope that from the legal point of view, it will be much easier for everyone as well. That, for instance, it will be much easier, for instance, even within the European Union, to live in one country and work in another one remotely. Because I can tell you that that was an example. That was a case that I had 2 years ago when we were moving from Poland to the Czech Republic. That it was quite, a big question how to make my husband stay in his work when he was employed in Poland and live in the Czech Republic working remotely. And it appeared it only made sense to do it in the way that happily his company also had a legal entity in the Czech Republic, because they used to have an office here. They don't have anymore, but the legal entity stayed, so they could actually employ him officially in the Czech Republic. Otherwise, that would be very difficult, and I think a lot of companies struggle with that. Okay. Okay, so thanks, Ray. We're recording, so you'll be able to listen from the recording to what was later on. Okay, so let's move on, because we actually met here to talk not just about the remote setup, but about the culture. And if okay, so as Zuza said, it's a transformation. So the same goes with the culture, actually. And I think it's not just about making sure that you don't lose your culture, but being ready to the fact that your culture will change to some extent, because it has to. You know, like, first of all, you need to know what you have. You need to know what the current mood is. You need to know where are some kind of, you know, like, opportunities or threats. If you have some weak points in your culture, will they strengthen? Or maybe you have some great opportunities, that there's something that actually, I don't know, people start to communicate better and collaborate better because they know it's difficult and important, so they put much more effort into that one, and maybe something changes itself, but you need to know how it changes itself. But there's also the part where you need to align your culture with the fact that you're working remotely, and there are some values that you actually should have. And I think, Zuza, you brought up when we were discussing an example of transparency.
Yes, yeah, that's what I wanted to add, was that for many of the companies, it was a great exercise in the sense, or review maybe rather than exercise, to make them realize what their actual values are. Because like the walls or papers and posters, they can carry anything, so you can write down that you are transparent and your core value is trust. But for many, I think it could be either pleasant or very unpleasant surprise that they are not who they think they are, and that the values they actually live are completely different from what they have been saying, and maybe they're also different from what remote work requires. So again, when you are going back to this whole look at the thing as a transformation, maybe you should reconsider also, or evaluate your values and look at the fact whether your values during the corona or during the remote work have been actually lived, because you cannot survive as a company, as a remote company, or at least partially remote company, if things like transparency, mutual trust, collaboration are not your key core values, and people don't understand them or they don't live them. So that was just my comment to the fact that your company values either need to align with the remote work values, or they should be pretty much the same. So, and also you should define what it actually means, because now for the first time you could see it in practice. So actually, are we that transparent, or are we that trusting? Did the managers actually trust their people that they work, or how was the overall approach to this? So do also values audit or something like that, at least from the basic perspective of whether it's aligned with the remote work values.
Yeah, and just to add to that, there might be cases where your value is valid, let's say, but how it will be manifested will be totally different. So it doesn't mean that, well, you will need to change the value and rename it or something, but maybe if you have some explanation of, you know, like what that means in practice, maybe that explanation needs to change. Maybe it makes sense to add examples from this, you know, like remote way of working that will make it clear how to leave those values in the new setup. And well, it depends on the company if it is that well described and then described in that detailed way. But for instance, if you have a value like integrity, right? It's super, good value to have. And it's good to have it both, in the office, when you work remotely or whatever. But the examples that you will give needs to be something that people will actually be able to use in their lives. And then also understanding of the terms that goes with it. I was like even recently kind of commenting on what does it mean to be professional, right? And now when you have those kids running behind you, especially when you have lockdown and kids really at home, that doesn't mean you're not professional. And maybe even some terms require more open discussion so that people start understanding them differently, just because it matters in how they will then perceive others, how they will then collaborate. So I guess, yeah, looking at it makes sense. And together with that one, there is a context that I would say is much more psychological around this, like really soft. And the better people in your company and managers understand that, the easier it will be for everyone to really have good collaboration, good results, and good culture. And here I would actually start with motivations, with motivation. And with motivation, I'm just kind of looking in my notes so that I don't mix the name. There is a theory that I wanted to base on. Just give me a moment. Oh, I lost it somewhere. Okay. McClelland's human motivation theory that actually brings, divides motivation into three main types. So there are people who are motivated by achievements. So the thing that they will achieve, that's a driver for them. Then there are those who are motivated by power, and there are those who are motivated by affiliation. And that third group, in my eyes, for instance, is the one that will be the most affected by the fact that it's hard to collaborate in the same way that it was before, because those are the people who are really looking, like they get motivated by the fact that they will be working on something really together with others. And that together is not always, perceived in a sense that I'm responsible for a step in a bigger project. No, it means that I sit together with other people, we discuss something together, we come up with a solution together. And for instance, this is the group of the people that will have much harder time feeling, if they happen to feel, like more isolated from others, and that might have impact on, for instance, how they work, right? There are different personalities. There are those who feel super great when they sit in one place, they can focus and so on. And there are those who really need more interactions, and it will have impact on how they work. Then the point that, so I think you will explain quite nicely about cultures. Mm-hmm.
Regional cultures and diversity. I think that it's important to say that it's different for companies that are, for instance, let's say Czech-based, and the core team, even if you were not before or even if you were not before remote, that your team were mainly, for instance, Czech people, or I'm just saying Czech because we are Czech-based, but they are more or less one nationality, as when there is a difference between companies that have Czech employees that then work remotely. So if it's different for a company who has Czech workers, for instance, I don't know, working from Bali or Spain or US, but they are still Czechs. And it's different for a company that has people from Bali working for them, and people from Spain working for them, and people from Norway working from them. Because here you can struggle, and sometimes I can see it with the companies that I work with, that they struggle and they don't understand why it's not working, because for the company that sits in the next building to them, it works perfectly. But sometimes it's just a matter of the fact that the company next door is one nationality, or the main nationality is very strong there. So even if the people work from all over the world, they have a common understanding of some things, and they have this common national culture, which defines in some sense their approach to work, their approach to time, their approach to authority. And of course, there's always personality, but if you know the work of Hofstede, that defined or was looking at different nationalities and their approach to power, or how much leadership they need, how much instructions they need or want, if the structure they like is more flat, or it's a pyramid with one strong person at the top. And all of these things then can play a very strong role in how your company culture, company remote culture works. So you should consider looking at your employees, whether it's a coherent group in the sense of nationality, so you can count on some things that will be more or less common for the people, and you don't need to explain. Or if it's not that it's remote, but it's more that, I don't know, Spanish people want to work more in the afternoon, and someone from Asia, for instance, has a different work ethics and expects that everyone will be working 24/7 or something like that. Again, it's a stereotype, but it's an example, and I think you understand what I'm trying to say. So even when looking at your culture and setting up remote culture, take into account that there are national differences, and that it's not matter of your company, but it can be a more a national or cultural thing as such.
And I think it's an important point when the company decides to be more remote and start, for instance, hiring people from, like more places, because it gives that possibility. So it opens more towards other locations, other nationalities, and then this topic pops up. And it makes sense when you're heading towards new setup to also define personas, like the key groups that you have. For instance, people who will work 100% remotely, people who will work partially from here, partially from there, and just, and those, for instance, who will be in the office all the time, to really look into those groups and what kind of needs they might have, because their needs will differ. Just to give you an example, like someone who works partially from home, partially from the office, they need to have an easy way to switch from working in one place to another place. And if they work, I don't know, they have a PC in the office and then use their private laptop, but with all the VPNs and so on at home, then, for instance, starting the work at the beginning of the day takes more time, like with the whole, like opening all the applications and this kind of stuff. So it's not just about making sure that, well, if someone works from home, that they have the laptop, for instance, but really to take into account different groups, taking into account also those differences that might be cultural, differences that might actually come up with those different kinds of motivations, or, like more psychological. And that's also important because well, actually, almost every one of you mentioned in the form at the beginning that, well, the biggest challenge is engagement. But then the question is, what do we understand under engagement? And the company, the management, they need to have it clear what engagement means for them. Maybe they look more into productivity and that's what they expect from the engagement. Or maybe they look more into like general, like well-being and satisfaction and so on, because then you actually have different goals. And well, I personally know people who are extremely engaged, but their productivity is super low because their engagement is more on the side related to happiness, satisfaction, and it comes to them from the fact that they're working with other people, with their friends, and so on. I also know people who well, seem to be productive because they do a lot of things, but they're not really efficient in their results. So the company needs to define what do we understand behind engagement and what is the real goal that we have. And then based on that one to look into how to make it happen in this new remote setup. And I will move here to those challenges that remote setup brings. And well, my favorite one, so I'll start with that one, is feeling of belonging. When I was like thinking myself, okay, when I'm working at home for a longer time, what do I miss the most? And what might actually impact my own motivation, my own engagement? And from the point of view of motivation, I'm rather driven by achievements, but still I need to feel I belong to some group, that I'm not alone. Even if I sit alone, I don't want to feel isolated. I want to feel part of the group. So I assume that there will be a lot of people that will have the same thoughts. There is a difference between isolation, like this feeling of belonging, when there is a lockdown and you can't go out afterwards and meet your friends, some kind of group where you feel part of it, or if everything is okay and you just kind of like work from home for a longer time, because that's the question of if you can compensate it somehow. And if you are working in a company, one thing is the feeling of belonging to the company, that I'm part of the whole organization. Another thing is feeling of belonging to some group. It could be your team. It could be a project team. It could be a team based on, I don't know, some interests, for instance. And well, the best is when it's combination of all possible groups. So you have like more of those groups actually that you feel you belong to. And yeah, Zuzi, like if you could reflect maybe on other points.
Yeah, and just to maybe to add to that is that if mission, vision, and all of these things were treated in your companies before as nice to have, and it was somewhere on the website or somewhere in the some kind of brochure or something for the newcomers. Well, in remote companies, it turns to must. So also for creating the feeling of belonging, now the people must understand more than ever what's the big picture, what's the vision, what's the mission, because if they don't understand it, it's much easier to lose the motivation to get out of the bed in the morning if you don't believe what the company is actually doing, and you don't even understand, and you don't understand what your team is doing. You don't have the trust in your manager. So all of these things are now much stronger because you won't have the other people that kind of motivate you sometimes when you get to the office and you just feel like, I don't know, I'm kind of like struggling here. And then someone comes with something brilliant, or you see how it all fits into the picture, and it motivates you and it makes you push more. So here you will have to, as the people that are responsible for the culture, engagement, communication, you will have to push more and think about whether the people understand why they should get up in the morning and go sit down and work when it's sunny outside and they have a lot of laundry and they would love to bake something and all the other things that you would love to do, but you have to do your tables and reports. You need to be, you need to feel being heard and understood, and that goes together. That if you don't feel like you are not heard and you are not being understood, then you cannot feel like you belong. If you are part of a group when no one cares about your opinion and no one actually asks you ever, so how would you feel that you belong and that you contribute when your ideas are not taken into account? And knowledge retention, exchange and learning, that's a big struggle, because we didn't, at the beginning, we didn't talk about some of the key benefits and risks that we defined. And one of the big challenges that we think that companies are facing when working remotely, or at least partially remotely, is how to keep the knowledge and know-how in the company, and how to develop people, and how to proceed with some kind of learning and development. That becomes a huge challenge if you don't have the people in the same room and they are developing kind of in their own pace, on their own. And so if you are an HR person, you have to be extra careful that you have some kind of knowledge base, and that you have a plan and strategy how the knowledge will be kept in the company and passed on. So that were my comments to this slide.
So I think those challenges might be quite obvious, but maybe there's something that you also noticed, that you also think is something that your company should focus on, and did you already try to do something with it?
So for us at UI, it's one of the things that we still kind of struggle with is recognition. Mm-hmm. Because it is I think that it is much easier, even from the perspective of a manager, to show your appreciation to someone in person. And I think it gives some bigger value to it than just getting an email or something like that. Because of the video fatigue, we are now, at first everybody was turning on videos, but now everybody's tired, so we are just using our voices. And some other example from the recognition perspective is that we have promotions at EY. We have promotions once a year. It's always globally, it's always the same date. There are of course some exceptions, but there's one date for globally that we have promotions, and there's usually parties that countries are organizing to kind of celebrate it. And this year, well, it will not happen. In some countries it will not happen at all. In other countries it will happen, but then we kind of know already that many people will not come because of their maybe still being afraid, even though the virus might not be present in the country, or of their personal health concerns and so on. So recognition is something that is really difficult for us, and we are still trying to think hard how to do it. Mm-hmm. Because we know that it's a very, very important part, and always, for example, when people are getting promoted to senior manager roles, there used to be this big programs for them to go to the training week or something like that, and then they could network with people from other countries. So it was something super big. and now we don't have it, and we really find it hard to find a replacement that will be of equal value to people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can imagine that. You know, like just maybe changing the the detail a bit. One thing that just came back to my mind based on a survey that a company called Lehman did. They were actually surveying 50,000 people about working from home during the period with coronavirus. And the things that were there that surprised me the most, it's as I'm saying, like it's not really connected to the recognition, it's connected to age. I was surprised because it appears from that survey that the group that kind of like really preferred working from the office and is the less satisfied from working from home are the youngest people. Really, I was surprised to see that, and I was taking part in the webinar when they were explaining it, where that possibly came from, and because they also had some additional comments, and it seems that that point was actually related to one thing, socializing. So really, kind of feeling that you're in a group. Another thing was that younger people are usually in more junior positions, so it's about getting experience and knowledge from others. And another thing that was connected to that one might actually have been this feeling of, you know, like actually getting feedback, maybe not recognition, but feedback. Am I doing right? How is it going? And so on. So those that we would probably all expect that, well, they should be more kind of fluent with all those digital tools, were those that were actually the less satisfied from moving to the fully remote setup, for instance.
It's actually the same. We had exactly the same results of our internal survey, that young people, especially juniors, like on the entry-level people, especially learning from others, it's something that is much more difficult now. And yeah, like also people who are, because it's a stereotype again, but people who are older and people who have families especially are the ones who much more appreciate working remotely, which it was also surprising for me, but yeah.
Yeah, okay. And I just want to say that we're like, we have 5 minutes and we have still a lot to say. So we can continue, like it can be recorded, and if someone will need to leave us at 5, then that's absolutely okay. Well, like I think we need to practice more how to use the content so that we don't have to talk, like, so that we don't plan to talk more than we actually have time for. But just moving to the to some ideas, solutions, how to work with the setup. Well, we saw that a big thing is actually to have someone to follow, and the natural thought goes towards the direct manager, to the line manager, because when you have someone to follow, like even if you are remote with them, but you have them, you can turn to them with everything. They are actually creating some group around them, then it covers a lot of the needs that you have. They might be also giving you information and so on. So if we look at line managers, then it makes sense to take a closer look into how their role is defined, because the requirements that we would have for them might actually mean that they would need to have, you know, like a duplicate, one that will be working on the tasks that they still have, and one that will take bigger care of the people of communication and so on. So that might be a bit difficult topic in a lot of companies, to redefine what is the role of a line manager and to reduce the part with the hands-on tasks and make this role more people-related, communication-related. But I think a strong argument for that one is actually that if the company has given goals and the context in which it operates changes, then how you get to that goals in this context needs to be adjusted as well. So for instance, if you look at a totally different example, at the time when everything started to become digital, at the time when computers were entering the companies and people started sending emails, well, the need for those people who would run inside the office, you know, like bringing papers to different areas, well, that role wasn't that needed anymore. And we almost don't see, you know, like maybe in some companies somewhere, there is still someone who, you know, like goes with papers to distribute them around the office, but that actually doesn't happen anymore. So maybe we're in the same situation with line managers, where we really need to have a look into what they are for in the company, what will be the biggest benefit of their role. And in the remote setup, looking at all the needs and at all the context, it should seem natural to everyone that that role needs to evolve towards taking care more of the people and of that softer part, let's say, of being an employee. Zuzi, would you add anything to that?
No, I don't think to the line managers. I think you said it all. So yeah, so just that they need to realize that also their role in communication is different, and that it cannot be anymore handing over information or some points to internal comms team or person, or having someone else communicate with the employees. That they need to realize that it's their responsibility, and internal comms can just support them and give them the tools or the trainings, but it's up to them to communicate more than ever.
Yeah, and I saw in the forum that we had at the beginning that someone actually said that is happening already, that managers are taking care more of the communication than they used to. Same with senior management. They still need to be visible. They can't just, you know, like sit somewhere in their houses, flats, wherever, and just simply focus on working. They have to be visible. If they had a practice to be, you know, like really visible in the office because they were like working through the corridors, drinking coffee here or there because that was their style, then they need to find a different way. Video messages, for instance, that people just need to really see that there is this key leadership in the company, that we know where the company is heading as well. So it needs to be clear that the captain is there on the boat. And there's a group of natural leaders and influencers, and it makes sense to also have a look into that group, equip them with information, and they will be great to form those groups, you know, give people this feeling of belonging. And it's really, really worth not to miss that opportunity. And let's jump super quickly into maybe some other points. Is there something, Zuzi, that you like really care about from what we have here?
Yeah, I think, well, I'm looking at it to take it in some logical order. So yeah, so what we we're discussing is the fact that you have to, like, the people need to be in the center of everything, even when you are picking the tools and when you are preparing the strategy and switching to digital. So then it may be obvious, but maybe it becomes less obvious with the practical things like different time zones and different requirements of people for their offline work, when they need to do deep work and actually focus on something. So people over platforms and thinking about the people in the strategy, it seems like that's a cliche, but then when you actually think about the different scenarios and just think about how you prefer to work, and when in different situation you require different things, to just not forget that in some things it may be easier to have digital, but in many things it's more challenging, and it's now you need to face different challenges that compared to the office communication or the communication that was face to face. So yeah, so just as an overall comment to the whole slide, where there you have the specific things named that need to be taken into account.
Mm-hmm. And I will just come back to what Aga said at some point, that people were jumping into video calls and then they're tired with that one. Well, we need to realize that there are like two sides of it. One of it is like how to collaborate. Well, you don't have to be on a video call. That's not the only solution that allows for collaboration and discussion. There are a lot of things that can be done in a written form, and sometimes it's even better if it's in a written form. So you need to really see the difference between written and spoken. And also another thing is that which of them needs to happen, you know, like instantly in a synchronous way. And maybe there's much more place for asynchronous communication than we thought before. So there are like really different ways of collaborating. Video call is not just one of them. And another thing is that no one is able to, like, it's physically and mentally impossible to work fully with, you know, like staring at the screen. It's just exhausting. So also in the survey that I saw, this Lehman survey, a point that was there was that people said that remote setup doesn't support taking breaks. And this is like super important. It seems that, well, I'm at home, I could do laundry, I could do this, I could do that. But actually it seems that a lot of people have this feeling that I have to be connected, I have to be present, I have to be there. I'm, you know, like on video calls all the time, and they don't take normal breaks that allow them, you know, to physically survive the working day. And it's very important to find a way to have this balance, to think which tasks can be done or parts of the tasks offline. You know, like when I think about some kind of a project, or, you know, like I have this kind of way, maybe I don't have to stare in the laptop, so, you know, in the screen. So maybe it makes sense to do it even going for a walk in the park. And a lot of inspiration could actually come from freelance people, and I see those examples on LinkedIn, for instance, when they say, well, I actually moved to having calls during a walk. So they are able to combine it. They still work, so it's not that they lose time in a given way, but they're in the nature. They're benefiting from looking at trees and so on. So I think it's a very important point to mention, so that people just simply physically are able to continue with the setup. And yeah, just maybe a couple of words here. Different channels. I think it's quite obvious if we're from internal comms that there are different things that, you know, like popped up even in a lot of recommendations during the coronavirus. And out of that one, I have one comment about mobile apps, is that there is a difference between providing information through a mobile app and between requiring a response through a mobile app. So that's also, if we don't want to make people feel that they work 24 hours, you know, like around the clock, then let's not expect from them an instant response at no matter what time, but let's use mobile app to rather give them information so that it works in this way. Zuzi, something from your side, your favorite one?
Yeah, it's my comment would be only to think about the connectivity of the different tools and channels, and that's also what I usually advise to the companies is you don't need any more tools. You have everything you need. It's just looking at it from a different point of view, and now looking at it from the point of view of remote working. So, and approaching it in the sense how we can connect it, or where we can add things, meaning content, or how to make it work more effectively together. You don't need to buy any more tools. You probably have them all, and it's not about the tool, it's about what you make out of it. So you can have only great internet and email, and maybe it will be enough because you work with it that well that you don't need anything else. So rather than buying every account and all streaming platforms and everything, just have a look at what you have now and how to adjust it to where you are heading, and adjusting it to the personas that you defined at the beginning, transform it based on the objectives and strategy that you redefined at the beginning. So that would be just my overall comment to the tools and channels from the perspective of remote work.
Oh, and from my side, maybe one explanation about point with physical contact, events, activities. Well, that point is not something that we can do during lockdown, but if you just simply consider remote setup as such, but there's no, like health-related crisis or anything like that, then it does make sense from time to time to find a way for the people to meet all together. If you have people working partially here, partially there, or depending on their choice, and there are those moments, Aga, you mentioned training week or some recognition parties or something like that. So those are the things that that we meant by this point. And quick summary of what internal comms as a function role here is. And yeah, apart from adjusting tools and this kind of things that seem obvious, well, if we're supposed to be seen as really advisors, then it's our role to step in now and just make sure that there is the right mindset in the company connected to the change, the transformation towards the remote setup. And because it's also on our side to help people to, as we have it here, teach, enable, support, so that they know how exactly to cope with the change, and then with the tools we give them, with the expectations that they get. And yeah, there's this point about translating whatever is possible from offline to online. Zuzi had like a nice example of what that actually might mean in practice.
Yeah, it's to think about things that you were offering before as an offline experience. And I had the two examples. One was for onboarding or the first day at work, where some companies, even during Corona, offered to the employees, or not offered, but they made sure that all the goodies and the company merchandise that you would normally have on your table, that they received the first day of their job. So they got this package with this company chocolates and notebooks and everything. So there is the sense of belonging, like you are valued the same way as people working from the office that have the table set up. And the second example was even for the team leaders, to help them think about ways how to translate the offline experience of the team to online. Like this team leader had pizza delivered to every door of the teammates. So they received pizza, all of them at the same time. So they had this meeting with food that these are usually very popular in companies where you have some kind of meeting with food. It's highly attended. So these are the things, how to connect the offline and online and not lose that much of this human touch in the online world.
Okay. So if any of you still has time and wants to start to like come to the discussion, then that's actually the moment. Is there anything out of those solutions that resonates with you, or that you already tried, or that you would like to try, or is there anything else that you think makes sense to do to make sure that the culture doesn't suffer?
Everyone's gone.
I can start. One thing that I really liked that EY in the Netherlands did was as a form of recognition for everybody working really hard, they have sent huge bouquets of tulips to every single employee. And like at the same time, it was like really nice because they also supported the flower business, which was really suffering because of Corona. So like that was like a really nice recognition that also had positive social impact. And like for me, from what we've done recently, is we created this. It was on one side about well-being, and on the other side about teaming. We created this challenge for all the teams in our region. That's about 30 plus countries, where they would team up and just do any sort of exercise for as many minutes as they can. And then we had this challenge for 6 weeks, and every week we would publish which team is on top and who is doing the best. In the meantime, we had some video challenges and people sharing with us how they work out at home with their animals, with their children and so on. So it was super nice, and people actually really appreciated, and they already want us to do another round. And another thing that we are now working on, because one of the things that came out from our survey is that people are missing the water cooler conversation. So we are making, since we don't have Slack, we are using Teams. We are introducing virtual coffee breaks, kind of. We are using Microsoft Flow to match people into groups of 3 or 4 people, so they can schedule a 15-minute coffee break every month and just talk about stuff. Like one of our other regions did it already, and people were like super hungry to actually get matched with more people and to like be matched with people from other countries. So like this need for social connection, I think, is what really surprised us in a positive way, and that people actually started to be more open. Like this is a positive thing, that people started to be open to connecting with people from other countries, which was like, super nice. So yeah, so we are focusing now, since our collaboration is pretty much sorted out, everything is working fine from what we see. The well-being part, the social part is what we are really trying to figure out and make nice for our people. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one thing that you mentioned about this collaboration then with other countries, that's something that when I used to work in a company where I had to work a lot with other countries and I had to work with them remotely, it was then super easy for me to start working from home, because that was actually the same. In collaboration with those people, I didn't feel any difference. It was really really the same. I felt the difference with those people, you know, that were sitting in the office in front of me, for instance, and then I didn't have them. But the fact that we found a way, like when you're sitting in the open space, and people sometimes chat with each other, even if, you know, like on some instant messenger, even if they don't see each other. So we were kind of like even if they see each other, and they could speak to each other, but because they're, I don't know, gossiping or something, they don't want to talk aloud. So we continued doing that, and we found a way, you know, like to replace that. But yeah, but the fact that you get used to working remotely, for me it was like first internationally, then from home, but I can imagine that the other way around also helps.
Yeah.
Okay. If Iveta or Anna have anything to add, or
at least
all 3 of us are happy.
it doesn't really, it wouldn't really answer the question you have, but I like the examples that Agata actually talked about. And what we are trying to do is to encourage like people to start kind of online clubs. So, you know, so it would be like away from HR or marketing or internal comms. So it wouldn't be only up to like somebody from the company, but really you know, employees would take charge in something they like to do, some interest. So we have like running club, cycling club. What really worked for us was Strava club. So you get that like weekly overview of, you know, how many minutes who spent running or cycling, and that's quite popular actually. And we also are trying to introduce some like more internal competitions. So let's say for this running, we have you know, once I think every quarter, every quarter you can win like a voucher for sneakers. Then we have another competition that is related to 3D printing. So the sense of belonging we are trying to create also through this, you know, like internal competition where you can get like little prize, and it engages like people that are interested in specific topic.
Do you also have like, or do you think of having clubs that are based more on, maybe not on sports and this kind of activities, but on some knowledge that is related to what people do? I'm asking because I also saw that in one of the companies that there was a group for project management, for instance. You know, there was like there are some topics that quite naturally outside of the companies become communities, you know, like people just build communities around a given topic, and that could maybe also happen internally. Do you have something like this?
We actually do, like R&D, like once the corona, you know, started and the lockdown, then the R&D actually created a community of like knowledge sharing, and that's very popular. But the topics there are really like R&D related, but it's working very well. So I'm glad about it. Then we have like a traveler, you know, like talking about traveling. We had like first session, so we need to work on that a little bit more to get it like more popular. What else? Yeah, the new one is actually like breath work. So we have this guy who became an instructor recently, and so he decided to do like sessions for Vicesofters. We will see if it will be, we will have first one like next week, which is going to be offline, but maybe, you know, online session would also work.
Yeah, cool.
Cool. And also we talked about it during the meetup, but for these activities we are encouraging people so they can get points towards the ambassador program, so they can collect points and then exchange for some swag. So, you know, little extra motivation.
Cool. Okay.
Sorry, ambassador program, can I ask just out of curiosity? So people get points for participating in different things, or how does it work?
Yes. Or like writing a blog or speaking at a conference, organizing, you know, specific meetups, or, you know, these interest-based activities.
That's a really good idea.
Or sharing on social media, also referral. So we have like a different groups of activities, and they can, yes, gain some points and then get a hoodie or something.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing.
I think this was great, ladies. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, thanks a lot for organizing.
Thanks. And if you have any other ideas for the topics you'd like to discuss, just let us know and we'll be digging into it.
Yeah, and maybe we forgot to say that, but since some of the people wrote that they will be listening to the recording, not everything that we wanted to say fit into this presentation, and we actually had many more like examples or practical things that we didn't talk about, but had even in the role of internal comms and such. And we wanted to also use some of the answers like anonymously, but overall in an article. So we would like to summarize what was said here and add some more things that we didn't have time to say, and create some kind of article that maybe would have some links, tips, and things that we found useful or that didn't squeeze into this. So.
And we have this Facebook group, so we can continue discussions.
Yeah,
there.
we can continue.
Okay, cool.
Let's continue the discussion.
So thanks, everyone.
Thank you.